quick. Well, what do we think is going to happen to Yara? So she was also brought back as another one of the gifts, but she left with Euron, right?
That could be Theon's redeeming action, potentially.
Okay.
We had him
Run
save
with
Sansa.
that. Run with that. I like that.
I mean, the concept is, and kind of alluding back to that conversation, he is a very dramatic character. He always tries to do what's best, but always makes the wrong decision. And you see these slight little times when it works out for him. So maybe going after his sister, helping her out, saving her from their uncle, great. Just a theory. He could also be devastated the rest of the time, and Yara could, in theory, just die.
I really hope that Yara comes back and meets up because she seems like a really valuable asset, especially on the sea. Theon, Yara, Euron, they seem to kind of own the sea at this point. And Euron mainly because of the size of his force and some of the other ships that he has lately, but I feel like she could, again, just be a really strong asset, and if Theon can save her, that's awesome. I don't see it happening at this point, but why else? You know, the ebb and flow of characters in George R. R. Martin's universe is typically good and bad. Nobody has been, like, just always on the up or always on the down. It feels like, well, if you think about Theon, he started so high, right? I mean, he's, like, essentially part of the Stark army. He's in there. He's essentially like a bannerman or a lord to the other Starks, a brother to Robb Stark, right? Excuse me, et cetera, but then he goes way downhill. When does that come back to even out? Because it doesn't feel like that yet.
Yep. All right, so let's move on from the dungeons of King's Landing.
Yeah, so Cersei
goes to Jaime. Nice little...
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
It's been a while
Nice
since
little
we've seen
revisit.
that good old incestual love.
What'd she want to do with that stump?
No. Oh, God.
Do we have, like, this part of the show contains very...
Warning!
This is not suitable for minors. Adult content
supervision
only.
required. But, like, there was a lot to actually unpack is the wrong word, but there was a lot to dissect in that scene, though, because this is the first time that we've seen Cersei just kind of, like, walk up there, fling up in the door, and, like, take Jaime. Now, it's also, like, another example of how Cersei views Jaime, which I think is still like a pawn.
Yes,
it's still like, hey, like, I just want to make sure we're still good. Like, I know you've kind of been mad about, like, this whole Euron thing recently, but I want to make sure you're still invested in my cause. I don't think it's in me. Yeah. I don't think it's in me. I think it's in my cause. You know what I mean? And she's, like, making sure that he's still loyal. Now, I do think that there is some level of love that Cersei has
100%.
for Jaime. But I think, like, moreover, it's another chess piece for her. And then the way that she just kind of, like, answered the door the next morning, you know, in a small scene like that said a ton. She was like, I'm queen now. We don't have to hide this shit. Like, we can just be together, and I don't care who knows it. You know what I mean? And so that was sort of a nice power move, I think, by Cersei, too.
I'm going to tease this for the last scene of the episode where, obviously, Lady Olenna and Jaime are talking, but Jaime is so blinded, in my opinion, by love for Cersei that he just is constantly doing dumb things. And you can see him unraveling a bit as these things take place, but there's a piece that Lady Olenna says later on that I think ties really well into this, where Jaime's apprehensive about all of it, but he's so blindly in love with Cersei that he falls into her trap every time.
Yep.
And
yeah, I think we really see her starting to use Jaime as a piece in her regard, and John can help us here. But in the books, from what I understand, is that, you know, she cheats on Jaime constantly, and there's all sorts of other ways that she treats him badly. But in the show, we haven't seen it be so drastic. But this is also kind of commentary on the war heroes of past as men, treating their women that way and using them sexually or otherwise, right? So it's kind of like a flip in gender role for Cersei to be the one who's coming in to that play.
Beth wants back on mic.
You know what?
I want to say something about consent here just before we move on. Like, Jaime said no.
Yeah.
At first.
He gave in afterwards.
Yeah, so whatever. Like Jaime said no, and Cersei was like, whatever.
I don't think he put up much of a fight.
I just think it's a real power change, right, for Cersei and for the entire like realm. And we're always used to, like from the beginning, and we talked about this on previous episodes, but men in power versus women in power. What does that mean? And she feels like a real king in this moment, a king of war, and she's just doing what she wants. She doesn't care. And then again, it comes up after that when the maiden comes to change do her bidding, and she says, "Yeah, you're gonna also want to change the bed sheets."
Whoa! What does that mean?
And she might as well have said, "Yeah, and that is my brother." Quit staring, right?
Worst job in King's Landing.
Oh God! Yeah. That would actually pocket that. That would be a good scenario for the end.
There it is.
That's actually great. Okay, so
moving from there, we see Bran come back.
No, not yet.
Not yet.
Cersei has a conversation with the banker from Bravos.
Okay, yes.
that's an important
Iron
scene.
Bank.
We don't want to skip that.
From the Iron Bank, which is a very big
Bravos. You were right.
Which is a big foreshadowing of events later in the episode and why things take place the way they do.
Yep.
It wasn't really a foreshadowing of events later in the episode, but that teaser at the end, and we're starting to jump around now. It was a foreshadowing of that, which let's talk about the teaser at the very end. But anyway, yeah, it was a conversation between.
I want to call out that is wine pouring to our listeners and not just somebody taking a leak on the mic.
In Game of Thrones fashion, drinking wine.
Some red wine.
Yeah, not all of us, but anyway. So
John's a man.
I drink beer.
He's 40.
All right.
Anyway, back to the subject at hand. So what we saw there was a conversation between basically a nation and the entity. I'm not even quite sure what Bravos is in the Iron Bank at this point anymore.
They're really cornered, right? Like, the bank in general is super cornered because they came in knowing that Cersei is, like we've all talked about each week, super underpowered and, like, smart money's not on you, Cersei. Like, smart money's on the lady with the 3 dragons.
But the Iron Bank also holds all the debt. They're the ones who's been paying the soldiers. They're the ones who's been buying all the food. Like, at any point, the Iron Bank can call up these debts.
Yep.
And unseat anybody on the Iron Throne. I mean, if you want a true commentary on some late-stage capitalism, we've got it right here. But no, this was a really cool scene. It's like Cersei was basically making her pitch to be the one who sits on the Iron Throne to the financier. And she did a really good job of it. It's like a Lannister always pays their debts.
Well, because they got into that argument, and she's so, like, artfully navigated it. We saw, like, a real example of Cersei's negotiation powers, right? Like, how she really is, like, Tywin Lannister's daughter in this scene, right? And so the way that she, like, pitched it to the Iron Bank at this point, I also have a theory that I want to get into, a crazy theory that's probably not true, but I'm going to save it for a second.
You're wrong.
I'm probably wrong.
Cersei is Tywin?
No, but
Oh, faceless men.
it does have to do with the faceless men. I'm teasing it too much. Just hold on. Just stay with me for a second. But the way that Cersei understood that from an outsider's perspective, the smart money's not on her. You know, I keep coming back to that idea of betting, and they even brought it up bluntly. They said, this is a bet, and she's like, you're betting on the wrong person if you bet on Daenerys. And he's like, well, fuck you. She's got 3 dragons and, like, the biggest army ever. He knows, as well as everyone else in the show knows at this point, that at any moment Daenerys could come and take the throne. But she's like, how do rebellious people like the Dothraki and dragons, and, like, how do they end up, you know, how do the banks end up faring after dealing with people like that? Are the dragons going to pay back debts? Are the Dothraki going to pay back debts? Are the freed slaves going to pay back debts? Like, all of a sudden, the bank is cornered into knowing that, like, shit, we have to back Cersei if we have any chance of, like, surviving as an entity, right?
Yeah, it's a good time for her to be like, do you know our house slogan?
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's legitimately the problem.
We do.
Yeah.
Now, here's my crazy, wild, out there theory that I don't think is true. But I just want to say it. I want to get it on air in case it happens to be true. Do we think there's a chance that this banker is Arya?
No.
There is this moment, though, at the end of that conversation where she invites the banker to say, she says, stay here for a week and a half and, like, make sure, a fortnight, 2 weeks, and make sure that, you know, like everything, checks out and you believe this and stuff. So now this guy's inside the walls for the next 2 weeks and pretty close to Cersei, who is still on Arya's list. We haven't seen Arya in a bit. So I just want to throw that out there as a possibility that maybe this guy's wearing a mask.
But that sets up Cersei's grand plan, which I think that's where we're going next, right? Like, what happened right after this scene?
Yeah, I think my only comment related to that would be, to me, it feels like Arya is going back north after meeting Nymeria and those interactions. But also, like, why would she let her get out of the room when they're together, just the two of them, if that was going to happen? But I understand your point of, like, well, yeah, hang out for a week and a half. Let me get to know you a bit.
2 weeks.
2 weeks. Sorry, yeah, again. Anyways, but I don't know. I don't feel like that's true. It's going to be really hard to believe another faceless men killing if it's that drastic.
Yeah.
Because then it's like, what are we even here for?
Mission Impossible 3.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha. Cool. So what is next?
Following scenes were Jon and Tyrion talking on the cliff, and then subsequently Jon and Dany. Tyrion and Dany in the war room near the table. And then we go to Winterfell.
I feel like we've covered most of Dragonstone up to this point. I know that conversation next with Dany and Tyrion was really just about, like, hey, let him take the Dragonstone. Or Dragonglass. Right?
So now we're at Winterfell.
Winterfell.
And that was like a solid Aaron Sorkin scene right there, where there's just walking through the Capitol.
I really appreciate that reference.
Right? Yeah. And, like, we're giving directions, someone goes off and does it. And I think that really speaks to Sansa's character. Like, she did learn a lot through all the shit she's been through, and she's very capable. But Littlefinger's still there, and Littlefinger is Littlefinger.
I actually felt like this week, if we can, like, take a step back and you were to just use this episode, like, in a vacuum, the way that Littlefinger was counseling Sansa this week was actually good advice. Like, the advice that he was giving to her about, like, you need to be waging every war all the time in your head and considering every outcome because everything's happening all at once right now, and if you don't do that, then something's going to take you by surprise.
Yeah. So I do want to point out, before we get to that scene, because I think that's a very important thing that she's continuing to learn, she's continuing to grow, and you can see these things paying off. There is, almost right off the top of that scene, where they're walking down, and the Maester's like, Maester Luwin kept really thorough records of all of the ravens that came through, and Littlefinger gives this kind of questioning look. So I'm curious what you guys think of that. Is he worried? Does he know something that we don't know? Do we know something that he might know? Is there a twist to that?
Yeah, I think it's a great call out because in addition, I think a different item that I was kind of reading some research about, or like online articles about the North, is like the actual raven area, the ability to send and receive ravens. Obviously, you have to be literate and you have to be able to get and have ravens. So it's educated people sending communications to each other, and the North doesn't have many of those people. And the Maester is new, right? The guy that actually is in the scene is new, but he was talking about the records of the old Maester. So yeah, there's absolutely opportunity to tamper with that. There's absolutely opportunity for him to get in there, or Littlefinger to even be like, let me do it because, I have this ability, I'm an educated man, etc. Mm-hmm. Do we feel like Littlefinger made more headroom back into Sansa's ear this episode than last episode? Because I feel like we've all kind of felt like Littlefinger was kind of getting pushed out of the picture.
I think he's been pushed out a little bit, but only because she didn't take any of his advice at this point. Like, she didn't listen to him up to now. And I think another interesting point that will probably come into play later is the whole grain. Like, how much grain do we have? How many stores do we have? I think we are going to see eventually some kind of climactic battle again at Winterfell.
I don't think. Yeah, you okay?
Yeah. So I just wanted to answer that question too, Joe. I think this week we saw Littlefinger change his strategy. Like, I think, like, up to this point, we've only seen him try to manipulate them, and now he's starting to realize, like we've talked about on the show for the last couple of weeks, like, that doesn't seem to be working. Like, it doesn't seem like what you're bringing up or what you're bringing or the what the stuff you're pitching is actually,
What's in the sauce?
What's in the sauce?
Change
There
the
we go.
recipe.
That's a good one.
Secrets in the
That's
sauce.
good. He's changing the recipe. Like, I think he gave sound advice to Sansa this week. I think he gave really good, wise wisdom that Sansa's going to be like, all right, maybe I can trust this guy. But, like, don't put it past the writers and don't put it past Littlefinger to realize that, like, he's only doing this to gain favor so that he can get back to his manipulative ways.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought he said that to Sansa before. She mentions it in a different episode. She says, I think she's talking to Jon. She says, I know